My younger brother's bedroom was on the side toward the hospital. My bedroom was on the other side of the house. The noise and screams woke my younger brother, and he came and got me. I ran to the window looking toward the hospital, and it was just flames everywhere. I had a school friend staying with me that night. I ran back to get her, and she came with me, and I said, "Oh, all I can think to do is pray." But about that time, they started bringing in patients, that they were able to get out of the hospital, and they were taking them to anywhere that they had room for them. And then it wasn't long, and they brought in my mother, carrying her on a door. Yeah, it was awful. It was just, there was so much fire, it was just like daytime. And just fire everywhere. That's the only way to describe it.
The fire started on April 4th, 1949. I would say that the hospital fire was a tragedy that impacted this community very heavily, and that the aftermath of the fire affected the entire country. It was a simple building in a small town, but it had a ripple effect on fire safety throughout this country and indeed internationally.
My mother and dad were born in Germany, came to the U.S. when they were in their early 20s, and still had family in Germany. And when one of my uncles was going to call them and tell them about my dad, they already knew it. They had already seen it on the news. A salesman my dad did business with brought two of the nuns up to stay and take care of my mother. And they walked in and looked around and said, "Well, where's Frank? Where's your dad?" And I said, "Well, he's in Effingham." And they said, "We all thought he was up here with your mother." I think that's when it actually hit me that maybe my dad had died. By the time I got home, my brother, who was away at college at the time, had come home, and my uncles, my mother's brother, my dad's brother, they were all there. And, well, there was nothing to do. It was probably 2 days before they actually found my dad's body. My older brother was asked to identify him. They knew it was him by his big bunch of keys, and he was found in the basement near a clothes chute with several emptied fire extinguishers around him.
At that time, I think people were overconfident, and it was kind of like the Titanic, the unsinkable ship. A lot of buildings were determined to be safe and fire safe. And probably in the 1946, there were about 4 hotel fires throughout the United States, Atlanta, and several others that they lost 61 lives and so many. And as a result of that, 1946, the Illinois Fire Marshal came out into hospitals, and at least on this hospital, the St. Anthony, the old St. Anthony Hospital, did advise and recommend that they put some fire exits on the end of the building, the spiral escape routes. But that was done in around 1946. But up until that time, there was unfortunately just this level of overconfidence. And as a result, the way they were built, or even the lack of organized fire drills, and some of those were not done.
Shirley Vigil Clements was a registered nurse who was a private duty nurse at St. Anthony's Hospital. What happened in this case is that Shirley Clements was called to do a night of duty with a private duty patient after she had actually resigned. April 1st was supposed to have been her last date to work, but she agreed because she cared about her patient, so she was on duty on a night when she really wasn't even supposed to be here.
Yes, she had actually put in her notice that they were going to move back to Granite City area, which is where her family was from. You know, Shirley died when Mom was 3 months old. We never got to meet her, but her history and her legacy and what she meant and how she lived and how she died, how she lived her life gets to live on here. So I have the opportunity down the road if we want to bring our family back and remind them of a true heroine.
I've thought about what the community was like in that first 24 to 48 hours. I think people were in a state of shock for the most part, but they kept soldiering on because they had to. The site had to be cleaned up, bodies had to be removed and identified.
Through his military experience, my father became the company commander of this local guard unit.
Well, the soldiers who were in Europe had experience with evacuation of buildings and that sort of thing. I mean, when bombs were dropped in Europe, there was chaos there too.
As company commander, he dealt with the morgue and identification of remains. And that took quite some time, given the nature of what had happened. There were a number of remains left that it became obvious to him nobody was ever going to know who they were. And he said the families that hadn't recovered remains kept coming in and coming in. My dad called a meeting of the families and explained to them they were never going to be able to identify these remains. He told them that his experience with them had shown him that they were good people. He told them, what I would like you to think about doing is this: claim a set of remains and bury them as if they are your own. Now, these people were a cross-cut of Effingham County from different social stratus, different backgrounds, different religions, and they had agreed to do as he said. Knowing the odds were that it wasn't their family, the local clergy worked together to facilitate that. My father was completely blown away by these families and how they came together. And as he related all this to me, it thoroughly impressed me. And ultimately, it made me feel very proud of where I come from.